All right, ready to dive into something small but mighty today. You shared a Wikipedia article about small modular reactors,
Uh,
SMRs. Got a nice ring to it, don't you think?
it does, it does. Kind of a futuristic appeal.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think the Wikipedia article is a great place to start. Gives that neutral, big picture view of what SMRs are,
Right.
why they're generating so much buzz,
Right.
and of course, the potential benefits and challenges they bring to the table.
Benefits indeed, challenges, love a balanced deep dive. So, to kick things off, this Wikipedia article talks about smaller reactors. Think factory-built, shippable, potentially less disruptive to install.
Mhm.
Almost like high-tech Legos.
Yeah, that's the general idea. This whole modular approach, right?
Yep.
Aim is standardized production, which in theory could lead to those lower costs, faster deployment.
Okay.
But but as with any new technology, and
Yeah.
especially one as complex as nuclear power, there's always more to the story.
Okay, so let's not get ahead of ourselves with all the potential upsides just yet. Before we break down those cost and installation claims, I have to admit, what really hooked me was the history of SMRs. We're not talking about a brand new idea here, are we?
Not at all. Not at all. It's actually, SMRs have a surprisingly long history. We're talking going all the way back to the 1950s.
Hit me with some of that historical context.
Okay, so picture this.
Mm-hmm.
You are tasked with powering a submarine,
Okay.
a vessel with, limited space, some serious energy demands. That's the challenge the military faced.
Right.
And it led them to explore these, more compact reactor designs, really the precursor to the SMRs that we're talking about today.
From powering submarines to, who knows, maybe powering a town someday? That's a wild thought. It really highlights how far this technology has come.
It does. And what's so fascinating is how this technology transitioned from those military applications to this push for commercial use. And this is where things take, I think, a really interesting turn. This concept of a commercially viable SMR, it didn't originate in some, high-tech government lab. It actually, it was Oregon State University.
OSU, as in the beavers. Tell me more.
Exactly. Exactly. Back in the late 90s, early 2000s,
Okay.
researchers at OSU, they were instrumental in pioneering this concept of the SMR for civilian use.
Wow.
They envisioned a reactor that wasn't just smaller, but also, fundamentally different from its military predecessors. Inherently safer, faster to build, more cost-effective.
So OSU really laid the groundwork for what we're seeing today with companies like, say, NuScale Power. They're the ones who snagged that first ever design approval for an SMR in the U.S., right?
You're right. NuScale Power has been making waves, in the SMR world. Their design got the green light from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission back in 2022. Truly a significant milestone. However, and this is where we need to, temper that excitement with a dose of reality. Their much anticipated project in Idaho, which was set to be the first commercial SMR plant in the U.S., was recently canceled.
Hold up. Canceled. What happened? Was it technical issues, regulatory hurdles? What was it?
The primary culprit,
Yeah.
cost of overruns. It seems that the projected economics of SMRs, at least in this particular case, didn't quite pan out.
So that idea of economies of scale, where, building more supposedly lowers the cost per unit, not always a sure bet, huh?
Not necessarily, and I think it highlights a really crucial point about emerging technologies in general.
Yeah.
There can be this big difference between those projections on paper and then the real-world implementation.
Okay. So it's more complicated than just assuming SMRs will automatically be cheaper than traditional nuclear power.
Mm.
What about the safety aspect? One of the big selling points I keep hearing is that SMRs are inherently safer because of their smaller size.
Mm-hmm. Right.
That's the claim. And, there's some logic behind it.
Smaller reactors mean less radioactive material, which in turn means less decay heat. And let me explain that quickly. Decay heat is basically the heat that's generated by the radioactive decay of those fission products.
And less decay heat is a good thing
As
because...
it directly relates to the risk of a meltdown.
Okay.
Less decay heat means a lower likelihood of that core overheating and potentially causing, a catastrophic event.
Okay, that makes sense. But something tells me it's not quite as simple as smaller equals safer, right?
Yeah.
What are some of the counter-arguments to that idea?
Yeah, you're right to be cautious. So while each individual SMR might statistically be less prone to a meltdown, right, the vision for SMR deployment involves a lot more reactors in a lot more places.
Right.
So this kind of raises those concerns about the overall risk associated with, such a widespread network of these small reactors.
More reactors, more places. Yeah, I can see how that might offset the whole smaller is safer argument, even if each individual reactor is statistically less likely to have a major issue.
Exactly, exactly. It's like that old saying, a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. And and let's not forget about the human element here, right? SMR proponents often highlight the need for smaller operating crews,
Right.
as a cost-saving measure. However, that could potentially increase the risk if something unexpected does occur.
Fewer people on hand if and when things go wrong. Got it. Okay, ready to tackle the elephant in the room. We've talked about cost, we've talked about safety, but what about the nuclear waste generated by these SMRs?
Yeah, you're right. Crucial aspect of the whole nuclear energy discussion. And this is where things get really interesting because the type of SMR and its fuel cycle, they have a significant impact on the amount and the type of waste that's produced.
So it's not a one-size-fits-all answer when it comes to SMR waste?
Not at all. Not at all. Some SMR designs are actually being touted as, potential solutions to the waste problem.
Really?
Yeah, we're talking designs that could drastically reduce the need for long-term storage.
Wait, really? Eliminating nuclear waste almost sounds too good to be true. How would that even work?
Well, it depends on the specific SMR design. But some of these advanced concepts like molten salt reactors or metal-cooled fast reactors, they are, theoretically capable of burning up a much larger portion of their fuel,
Burning it up, meaning?
meaning they can fission a greater percentage of that radioactive material, leaving behind less of that long-lived waste. There's even, the concept of a traveling wave reactor, which aims to continuously burn the fuel it breeds without ever needing to remove and reprocess it.
Okay, now that sounds straight out of a sci-fi movie. Are we talking about technology that's actually being developed or more kind of theoretical possibilities at this point?
Some companies are definitely exploring those advanced concepts,
Yeah.
but they are largely still in that research and development phase. Most of the SMR designs that are being actively pursued right now are based on that, more conventional light water reactor technology.
Okay, so back to those light water SMRs. How does their waste output compare to the big, traditional nuclear reactors?
This is where it gets a little tricky. So remember those economies of scale we talked about earlier, where building more units supposedly leads to cost savings? Well, it turns out that logic might not apply to waste in the same way.
What do you mean?
So a recent study, it was published in Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, and they found that due to their design, some SMRs could actually produce more waste per unit of power generated compared to conventional reactors.
Hold on. More waste even though they are smaller? How does that even make sense?
It comes down to something called neutron leakage.
Neutron leakage. Okay, you're going to have to break that down for me.
Yeah, okay. So think of it this way.
Right.
Smaller reactors have a higher surface area to volume ratio,
Okay.
which essentially means more neutrons escape from the core without interacting with the fuel.
And those escaped neutrons, that's the leakage.
Exactly. Exactly. And here's why it matters. Those neutrons, instead of contributing to that fission process that generates the power, they end up getting absorbed by the surrounding materials within the reactor.
Right.
And that absorption process can actually make those materials radioactive, which contributes to that overall volume of nuclear waste that needs to be dealt with.
So even though each individual SMR might contain less radioactive material overall, because they are smaller, the amount of waste they produce relative to the power they generate could actually be higher.
That's the concern raised by the study.
Yeah.
And they also highlighted that due to lower fuel burnup in certain SMR designs,
Yeah.
there could be more unused fissile material left over, which further adds to that waste volume.
Wow. Okay. Definitely not the simple answer I was expecting. So more to consider there than meets the eye when it comes to SMRs and waste. Switching gears a bit here, we touched on this earlier, but let's dive a little deeper. What about this whole idea of SMRs potentially increasing the risk of nuclear proliferation?
It's a valid concern. With, SMRs envisioned for deployment in a wider range of locations, potentially with, reduced security measures on site. Due to those smaller operating crews, the risk of theft or misuse of nuclear materials could increase.
Okay, I see where you're going with this. More reactors in more places, potentially with less oversight. That does sound like a recipe for potential trouble.
Exactly. It's a classic case of weighing those potential benefits against those potential risks. And in this case, the stakes are, incredibly high.
So are there any safeguards being considered to address these proliferation concerns?
There are definitely counter-arguments and proposed solutions. Some SMR designs are actually incorporating features that are specifically aimed at enhancing proliferation resistance.
Like what?
Well, some designs call for longer fuel cycles, which means refueling wouldn't be needed as often, reducing those opportunities for theft. Others, others propose installing the reactors underground, or even utilizing like one-time fueling, where the fuel is, sealed within the reactor for its entire lifespan, never removed.
Okay, so it's not a black and white issue. There are both risks and potential safeguards to consider. What about the process of licensing these new reactor designs? Is it keeping pace with all this rapid development in the SMR world?
So that's another area where things are rapidly evolving. Traditionally, nuclear licensing processes have been geared toward, those large conventional reactors.
Which makes sense because that's what's existed for decades.
Exactly, exactly. But SMRs, with their unique features, those diverse designs, they're kind of pushing those boundaries. They're requiring a more adaptable approach to licensing.
Because at the end of the day, regardless of size or how modular these reactors are, that licensing process is, it's crucial to ensuring they meet the highest safety, security, and safeguard standards.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there's a delicate balancing act at play here.
How so?
Well, on the one hand, you have this global push for rapid SMR deployment, right? To help address climate change goals, transition away from fossil fuels. But on the other hand, you have the need for thorough and rigorous safety evaluations,
Right.
which by nature take time. And rushing the process could have, disastrous consequences.
So it's a balancing act between that urgency of the climate crisis and the need to ensure these reactors are safe and secure.
Precisely, precisely. And
Yeah.
finding that balance is crucial. The IAEA, they've been advocating for a more centralized licensing system for SMRs.
What would that look like?
So the idea is to, streamline that process, potentially making it more efficient, while still upholding those rigorous standards.
It sounds like there are a lot of moving parts here, a lot to unpack and consider. We've covered the potential for SMRs to address climate change, but also, the potential downsides when it comes to waste and proliferation. We've explored the history of this technology, the excitement around its potential, and some very real challenges that need to be addressed. And we've even touched on how the regulatory landscape is evolving to keep pace with these advancements.
It's a complex picture for sure, and it's important to remember that this is a rapidly evolving field. New designs are constantly emerging, and our understanding of the potential impact of SMRs, both positive and negative, is continually being refined.
Okay, so for you, the listener, what are the key takeaways here? What does this all really mean?
It means that SMRs, while promising, they're not this simple, silver bullet solution to our energy challenges.
Right.
They offer some very real possibilities, but also some potential downsides that we need to carefully consider.
It's easy to get caught up in the hype, especially when we're all searching for those solutions to climate change.
Exactly. We need to approach SMRs with a healthy dose of skepticism, to ask those tough questions and to demand transparency from those developing and promoting this technology.
So where does that leave us? Are SMRs a risk worth taking for a cleaner energy future?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Ultimately, it's a decision that each individual, each community, each nation will need to answer for themselves. But what we've tried to do here is equip you with the information, the context, and hopefully the motivation to make that decision from a place of knowledge and understanding.
It's like you said earlier, with any new technology, especially one as powerful as nuclear energy, critical thinking is key. We can't just get swept up in the excitement without acknowledging the complexities and the potential risks.
I completely agree. This isn't about being, pro-nuclear or anti-nuclear. It's about being pro-informed and pro-responsible. We need to carefully weigh the potential benefits of SMRs against those potential risks and make sure those risks are addressed, proactively and transparently.
So having gone through all of this, where do you land on SMRs? Are they a risk worth taking?
Well, that's the million-dollar question. And I don't think there's, an easy answer. What we've uncovered in this deep dive is that SMRs aren't a guaranteed win in terms of cost, safety, or even waste reduction. All of those areas, they come with caveats. And And while there are potential safeguards, those proliferation concerns are definitely something to grapple with.
It's a mixed bag, for sure, which is why this deep dive has been so valuable. It's easy to get kind of seduced by the promise of new technology, but like you said, we have to be cautious. But it's not all doom and gloom, right? There are some compelling potential upsides to SMRs. What are some of the things that you think are worth, being hopeful or at least cautiously optimistic about?
Yeah, yeah. One of the, I think, most promising aspects of SMRs is their potential to provide, decentralized power generation.
Oh.
Their smaller size makes them, suitable for a wider range of locations, including, remote areas or regions with, limited grid infrastructure.
That could be huge for bringing reliable energy to parts of the world that lack access to those, traditional power grids. And what about those other applications we touched on earlier, like desalination or hydrogen production? Could SMRs play a role in those areas?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's a lot of excitement around the potential for SMRs to contribute to those sectors. For example, using the heat generated by these reactors for desalination. That could help address, water scarcity issues in certain parts of the world. Yeah. And producing hydrogen, which is a clean burning fuel with SMRs, that could further support the transition away from fossil fuels.
So it's not just about electricity generation. SMRs could be part of a much larger shift in how we think about, energy and resource management.
Precisely. Precisely. And it's crucial to remember that SMR technology is still in its early stages. As research and development continues, some of the concerns we've discussed, like waste generation or proliferation risks, those might be mitigated through innovative design and engineering.
So in a way, we're still in the early chapters of the SMR story, and the ending is yet to be written.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's why it's so important to have these conversations now. The decisions we make today about SMRs, they will have long-lasting consequences.
That's a great point. It's not just about the technology itself, but about how we choose to, develop, deploy, and regulate it. And those decisions, they need to be made with careful consideration, transparency, and a lot of public engagement.
I couldn't agree more. It's not just up to, scientists, engineers, and policymakers to shape the future of SMRs. It's a conversation that needs to involve all of us.
Well said. It's like you said at the beginning, it's all about being informed and engaged. Hopefully this deep dive has given you, the listener, a solid foundation to, to understand the potential and the challenges of this technology and to form your own, informed opinions.
And remember, the conversation doesn't end here. Continue to explore, ask questions, and stay curious about this ever-evolving world of SMRs. After all, the future of energy is something that affects us all.